Stop. He's already dead. The fire chief's voice sliced through the chaos at the collapsed building site. Alexander Mitchell looked up from where he knelt beside the motionless construction worker, hands still pressed firmly against the man's chest. Around him, rescue workers shook their heads, some already turning away toward other victims in the Boston disaster zone. "Sir, he's been down for 12 minutes, a firefighter said, his tone gentle but final. "We need to focus on those we can still save." Alex felt their eyes on him, judging the stubborn paramedic who refused to accept what everyone else could see. Chief Bill Harrison approached with heavy steps, his expression hardening when he recognized Alex. "Mitchell, I need you to call it. We don't have time for your military heroics today." The slight emphasis on "your" carried the familiar undercurrent of judgment Alex had faced since coming out. The chief had never approved of having an openly gay paramedic on the rescue team, especially one who'd served as a Navy SEAL. But they didn't know about the classified techniques Alex had learned during his 3 tours in Afghanistan. They didn't know about the experimental resuscitation protocols he'd witnessed in field hospitals, where giving up meant watching fellow soldiers die. In their world, 12 minutes without a heartbeat meant death. In his world, it meant you hadn't tried everything yet. Alex positioned his hands differently on Marcus Chen's chest, not in the standard CPR position, but slightly lower and angled. His thumbs pressed into specific nerve clusters along the ribs, pressure points he'd learned from a Chinese-American combat doctor in a forward operating base outside Kabul. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. Alex closed his eyes briefly, focusing on sensations others couldn't perceive. The technique bordered on something ancient, yet integrated with modern understanding of cardiac physiology. As Alex's hands moved in a precise sequence, applying pressure in patterns that looked nothing like standard resuscitation, Jake Wilson knelt beside him. Unlike the others, Jake had seen enough in their 2 years as partners to trust Alex's instincts. "Alex, what is this?" Jake whispered. "This isn't anything we learned at Boston Med. I learned it in the SEALs," Alex replied without looking up, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool spring air. "Sometimes the protocols aren't enough." Alex thought of David, his husband of 5 years, working his shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. David would understand what he was attempting here: the desperation, the refusal to give up when conventional wisdom said it was over. Their shared commitment to saving lives had brought them together after Alex left the military. The crowd grew restless as minutes passed. Harrison muttered something about reporting this to the Massachusetts Medical Board, but just as the chief opened his mouth to order Alex away, a sound, so faint it might have been imagined, escaped from Marcus Chen's blue lips. Subscribe to Heart Stories to discover the revolutionary technique that challenges everything modern medicine believes about the limits of resuscitation. Because sometimes, when everyone else has given up, one person's refusal to accept defeat can make the difference between life and death. The advanced cardiac monitor showed what Alex's trained hands had already detected: weak, irregular, but unmistakably present electrical activity in Marcus Chen's heart. Not enough to sustain life, not even close to normal, but present when minutes ago there had been nothing. "Jesus Christ," Harrison breathed, his previous contempt dissolving into disbelief. The crowd of rescue workers fell silent, the only sounds being the distant sirens and Marcus's first shallow breaths. Alex was already moving into the second phase of the technique, a series of compressions that followed specific neural pathways while simultaneously stimulating electrical patterns in the heart tissue. This wasn't anything taught in standard paramedic courses or even advanced cardiac life support. This was knowledge that existed in the shadowy space between battlefield necessity and experimental medicine. "I need epinephrine now," Alex ordered, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Jake rushed to retrieve the drug from their kit, moving with renewed urgency. The onlookers who had been ready to write off Marcus Chen as another casualty now pressed closer, witnessing something that challenged fundamental beliefs about death and resuscitation. As Alex administered the drug directly into Marcus's chest, following the injection with more of the specialized compressions, he thought about the NIH research paper he and David had discussed just weeks earlier, theoretical models of advanced resuscitation that pushed far beyond the standard 4-minute window for preventing brain damage. What he was doing wasn't magic, it was science that most civilian medicine hadn't yet embraced. The third phase required even more precision. This was where the technique either worked or confirmed what everyone else had believed from the start. Alex's hands moved with the muscle memory developed through years of training, applying pressure to points that corresponded to the heart's natural electrical pathways. Marcus Chen's chest suddenly heaved under Alex's hands, a genuine breath rather than the artificial movement of CPR. His eyelids fluttered, and a collective gasp rippled through the gathered emergency workers. Chief Harrison took a step backward, his face pale with shock. "That's impossible," the chief whispered. He was clinically dead for almost 20 minutes. Alex was already shifting to standard emergency care, his training taking over. "I need a stretcher, oxygen, and IV access." He's back, but he's not stable. As the team mobilized around him with renewed purpose, Alex caught a glimpse of Marcus's eyes, confused but unmistakably alive. Looking directly into his, Jake gripped Alex's shoulder as they prepared to transport Marcus. "What was that?" "That's not any technique I've ever seen." "Special Forces medicine," Alex replied simply, though the truth was more complicated. The technique he'd used wasn't just military training, it was a synthesis of ancient knowledge and modern science. Pressure points discovered centuries ago, now understood through the lens of neurological pathways and cardiac electrophysiology. As they loaded Marcus into the ambulance, Alex noticed news cameras arriving at the disaster site. Word was spreading about the miracle at the Boston collapse. He turned away from the lenses, uncomfortable with attention, but knowing that what had happened here would raise questions that wouldn't be easily answered. The real question wasn't whether the technique worked. Marcus Chen's beating heart proved that it did. The question was whether the medical establishment was ready to accept methods that challenged its fundamental understanding of life, death, and the gray area between them. For Alex Mitchell, the answer was simple: any technique that saved lives deserved to be used, regardless of whether it fit neatly into established protocols. The emergency department at Massachusetts General Hospital buzzed with controlled chaos when Alex's ambulance arrived. Marcus Chen's vital signs had stabilized during transport, defying everything medical science said about prolonged cardiac arrest. As the team transferred him to a hospital gurney, Alex caught sight of his husband David across the trauma bay, already moving toward them with professional urgency. 35-year-old male, building collapse victim, traumatic arrest for approximately 20 minutes before return of spontaneous circulation. Alex reported, his voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. GCS now 13 pupils equal and reactive. Following basic commands, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the attending physician, frowned as she absorbed this information. 20 minutes down. That is not possible without catastrophic brain damage. Her eyes met Alex's with professional skepticism. "I know what the literature says," Alex replied quietly, "but his neurological responses are improving by the minute." David Mitchell, senior trauma physician and Alex's husband of 5 years, maintained his professional demeanor as he began his examination. Though Alex caught the flash of recognition in his eyes, this was the miracle resuscitation that would have already reached hospital gossip circles via first responder channels. "What intervention did you use in the field?" Dr. Walsh asked, watching as Marcus responded appropriately to her penlight examination. Before Alex could answer, his radio crackled with Chief Harrison's voice. "Mitchell, we've got another victim in similar condition in Sector 3, female, mid-50s, teacher according to ID, no pulse for 18 minutes. Alex felt the weight of expectations settle on his shoulders as David's eyes met his across the trauma bay. "Go," David said quietly. "We've got this covered here." The ride back to the collapse site felt surreal. Jake kept glancing at him, clearly struggling with questions. "Alex, that technique you used, is it something they taught all SEALs?" "No, Ian," Alex answered softly. "It was specialized training. Not everyone received it. and not everyone could handle the responsibility that came with it. When they arrived, Alex could immediately see that word had spread. A small crowd had gathered around Elena Vasquez, a Latina woman pinned beneath concrete debris. Chief Harrison's previous hostility had transformed into desperate hope. "She's been down for 18 minutes, Harrison reported, his tone respectful now. "No pulse, no respiratory effort." Alex knelt beside her, aware of the expectations surrounding him. The whispers had already started. The gay paramedic who could bring people back from the dead. Some rescue workers were looking at him with something approaching awe, while others seemed skeptical that lightning could strike twice. He placed his hands on Elena's chest, feeling for the subtle signs that had guided him with Marcus. Every case was different. Every body responded uniquely to trauma and oxygen deprivation. He began the sequence of pressure points, acutely aware of the crowd watching his every move. But as Alex worked, he realized Elena's condition was different. The pattern of her injuries, the way her body had been compressed by the debris, the length of time without oxygen, all variables that affected the outcome. Despite applying the technique with precision, Elena's body remained unresponsive. After 15 minutes of effort, Alex finally stopped. The silence that followed was deafening, a quiet heavy with disappointment and shattered hope. "I'm sorry," he said softly, looking up at the circle of rescue workers. "Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't." As they covered Elena's body, Alex felt the familiar weight of battlefield medicine settling back on his shoulders. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that saving lives sometimes meant accepting that you couldn't save them all. The technique wasn't magic, it was science, with limitations and variables that couldn't always be controlled. News crews had arrived in force, drawn by reports of the Boston Miracle. Alex could see them interviewing witnesses, cameras pointed toward where he knelt beside Elena's body. The weight of public attention felt suffocating. This wasn't about one paramedic or one technique. It was about the responsibility that came with knowledge others didn't possess, and the burden of knowing when that knowledge wasn't enough. 2 weeks later, Alex sat in Massachusetts General Hospital's main conference room, facing a panel of doctors, administrators, and EMS supervisors. Word about Marcus Chen's recovery had spread throughout the medical community, and now everyone wanted answers. David sat at the far end of the table, his professional demeanor masking their personal connection, though his supportive glance spoke volumes. Dr. Walsh led the discussion, her tone clinical but curious. "Mr. Mitchell, we've reviewed Marcus Chen's case extensively by every established medical standard. His recovery should have been impossible. His brain scans show no hypoxic damage whatsoever after 20 minutes of clinical death. We need to understand exactly what technique you employed." Alex looked around at the expectant faces, including representatives from Harvard Medical School and the Massachusetts Medical Board. Chief Harrison sat rigidly in his chair, his formal complaint against Alex for protocol violation temporarily suspended pending this hearing. The technique I used combines several elements. Alex began carefully. It integrates pressure point stimulation based on traditional Chinese medicine with modified cardiac compression techniques and electrical pathway manipulation that I learned from Special Forces medical personnel. Patricia Morrison, the hospital's chief of cardiology, leaned forward. "Can you demonstrate these techniques, train others to implement them in standard protocols?" "That's complicated," Alex replied. "The technique isn't just about hand placement or compression sequences. It requires intuition about tissue damage, understanding of electrical pathways that aren't taught in standard medical training, and..." He paused, struggling to articulate the indefinable element that made the difference between success and failure. "And Dr. Walsh prompted, and the acceptance that sometimes you'll try everything and still lose someone. The psychological weight of that responsibility isn't something everyone can handle." Marcus Chen had made a full recovery with no apparent neurological damage, an outcome that had baffled every specialist who examined him. But Elena Vasquez remained dead, and Alex carried both outcomes with equal weight. "What we need to know," Chief Harrison interjected, is whether this technique can be standardized, taught, and implemented in our EMS protocols. It can't be standardized, Alex replied firmly. It works on reading subtle signs that monitors don't detect, making split-second decisions based on information that isn't visible on machines. But surely the basic principles could be taught, Dr. J. Morrison insisted. The basic principles, maybe, but without the experience to know when to apply them, when to stop, and how to live with the outcomes, you'd be setting people up for failure. David spoke for the first time. We need to consider the ethical implications as well. Alex's technique saved Marcus Chen when conventional medicine would have declared him unsalvageable. But medicine advances through careful study, not through implementing techniques we don't fully understand. The discussion continued for hours, ultimately reaching an impasse between those who wanted immediate implementation and those who recognized the need for careful research. As the meeting adjourned, Alex found himself approached by a quiet man who had observed without speaking. "Commander Mitchell," the man said, using Alex's former military rank. "Department of Defense, we've been following your case with interest. There are people who would like to discuss your technique in a more appropriate setting." As Alex left the hospital with David that evening, they were confronted by reporters and cameras. From one side came supporters from Boston's LGBTQ community, holding signs celebrating the paramedic who defeats death. From the other came conservative protesters questioning whether such power should be in the hands of someone they considered morally compromised. Between these extremes stood Marcus Chen's family, simply grateful, and Elena Vasquez's relatives, devastated by their loss. Medicine wasn't about politics or personal beliefs. It was about saving lives when possible and accepting limitations when necessary. The true challenge wasn't the technique itself, but finding the wisdom to know how and when to use it responsibly. 3 months later, Alex and David Mitchell sat in a secure conference room at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. On the table before them lay a comprehensive proposal for a specialized training program, one that would teach selected paramedics and combat medics the advanced resuscitation technique that had saved Marcus Chen. "We've reviewed your case files extensively," said Colonel Jennifer Ramirez, the program director. "The technique you use combines elements that exist at the frontier of our understanding of cardiac physiology. What makes it remarkable isn't just the method itself, but the judgment required to implement it effectively." Alex nodded, remembering Elena Vasquez and the other cases where the technique had failed. "That's why the selection criteria we've proposed are so stringent. This isn't something you can teach to every paramedic or emergency physician. It requires not just technical skill, but psychological resilience." David opened a folder containing brain scans from Marcus Chen, now 3 months post-resuscitation. "The neurological recovery defies everything we thought we knew about cerebral hypoxia. We're essentially rewriting the timeline for clinical death." The meeting continued with representatives from NIH and DARPA discussing research protocols, while AMA officials debated ethical guidelines. What had begun as one paramedic's battlefield technique was evolving into a formalized program that could potentially save thousands of lives. Later that evening, as Alex and David prepared for the formal announcement of the Elena Vasquez Foundation for Advanced Resuscitation Research, Alex's phone chimed with a new message. It was from Marcus Chen. Wow. Another monthly photo showing him playing with his children in a Boston park. The simple caption read, "3 more months of life I shouldn't have had. Thank you." Alex showed the phone to David, both men momentarily overwhelmed by the reality of what they were building together. The foundation would support research into the technique, train selected medical personnel, and establish ethical guidelines for its use. More importantly, it would acknowledge that medical advancement sometimes required stepping beyond established boundaries. The next morning, Alex would testify before a congressional health committee, explaining both the promise and limitations of the technique. He would face questions about standardization, about who should have access to such knowledge, about the line between medical innovation and established protocols. The answers weren't simple, but the principle guiding him remained clear. Knowledge that could save lives came with the responsibility to use it wisely. Sometimes that meant knowing when to try experimental techniques, and sometimes it meant accepting when even the most advanced methods couldn't change the outcome. As Alex reviewed his testimony, he thought about the first group of trainees who would begin the program next month, 20 paramedics and physicians selected not just for their technical skills, but for their judgment and psychological resilience. They would learn to walk the line between established medicine and innovation, between protocols and intuition. What would you do if you possessed knowledge that could save lives but defied conventional understanding? Would you follow the rules that everyone accepts? Or would you risk everything to try something unproven when someone's life hangs in the balance? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Heart Stories to explore more moments where courage and conviction challenge the boundaries of what we believe possible.